You are listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast, the only podcast covering all of your teams. Bringing you the best sports news from the state of Georgia, from the professional ranks to the high school levels, we have it all. Welcome back to the Atlanta Sports Podcasts. My name is Frankie Maloof, and I am joined by Luke Winslow today. We're going to be doing a National Signing Day recap. We're going to talk a little bit about the top prospects in the state of Georgia and how the college teams in the state did fare. And Luke, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Frankie. Glad to do another show and talk about some recruits. Haven't talked a whole lot about this very much on the podcast, so it's really exciting to start talking about the high school guys and where they're headed to college. All right, so starting off, number one in the state is D'Angelo Gibbs. He's the number one prospect in Georgia, listed as an athlete. Of course, he's a five-star, got some good size to him, 6'2", 205, and he is signed to go play at Georgia. Has an ESPN grade of 90, and he attended Grayson High School his senior year, and really played a lot of really good games there at Grayson. Helped his team go really far in the playoffs, and overall just an electrifying player. It's going to be great for Georgia to have him in the next 3 or 4 years because he's a big-time player, and especially if he plays in that secondary, he can definitely win some games for you.
And he was one of 5 3-stars in the state of Georgia, and all 3 of those 5 stars coming out of the state of Georgia went to the University of Georgia, so that says something about the way Kirby Smart and his staff have taken over this state. They've really protected their borders and locked down the top talent.
Yeah, Gibbs, in terms of statistics, 5 breakups and an interception. It's not a whole lot, but teams were not throwing his way because they knew what would happen. In previous years, his stats were a lot better, but overall, again, a great player. I'm really excited for Georgia, but another defensive back that I'm excited for Georgia to get is Richard LeCount, coming from Liberty County High School. His size is not quite as big as D'Angelo Gibbs. He's 5'11", 178 in terms of weight. And he also grades out of the 90s, going to Georgia, like you mentioned, Frankie. And LeCount's another player. He plays basketball, very athletic. In terms of stats, he's very good there, too. Can play some offense. He's played quarterback, running back, wide receiver. On defense, he's contributed a lot as a safety and special teams as well. So, Frankie, detail some of the stats for us.
Well, like you said, he can play anything. He played offense. He has 62 yards passing, 92 yards rushing, and 800 yards receiving. More often, he'll be in the cornerback or safety. They're looking at putting him probably at safety. That's where he's going to look because Georgia had a lot of other defensive backs for this class. But he had 11 tackles for loss. He's number 3 on his team in total tackles. Now, coming from a safety, you'd expect your linebackers to be up there, but that's good for him to be up at the top. 100 tackles is a lot for a safety. He had a sack and a half and then 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. So he's going to be a guy that Georgia will be extremely happy to have. And he can also play on the special teams units. He had 11 kickoff returns for 409 yards, including a touchdown that was 75 yards. So he can play anything. He can do whatever Georgia needs him to do, and he's a good pickup.
Yeah, LeCount also has a punt return touchdown. He led his team in scoring with 136 total points. I mean, like you said, he can do it all. He can play pretty much any position, but wherever Georgia puts him is going to be a good place. The Georgia team is now getting a lot of depth with these past 2 really good recruiting classes, and LeCount is another guy that can be an electrifying player, especially coming in as a 5-star. So the number 3 player in the state of Georgia is Robert Beal, a defensive end from Peachtree Ridge High School. He's a big dude, 6'4", 230, so not a whole lot of weight, but pretty tall. And again, a 5-star prospect, grades out as a 90. He is signed to play with Georgia. So he's a good player for Georgia to get. Add some depth to that defensive line that really can use it for next season and in the future as well. Moving on to number 4, Jemias Williams, a corner out of Grayson High School. 5'9", 173 is his listing. He's a 4-star, grades out as an 86. Signed to South Carolina, so Will Muschamp did a good job taking him out of Kirby Smart's hands. And South Carolina's got a really good young talent that they'll have. Jemias did a great job at Grayson, and he's a big-time player. He's made a lot of plays, rushed for over 1,300 yards at Archer in 2015 before he transferred to Grayson to play that senior year. But overall, another great player.
Yeah, and he was one of the ones that was maybe on the bubble a little bit. He was kind of on the fence. He couldn't decide if he was going to stay at home in Georgia. Obviously, the Dogs would have loved to have him, but Will Muschamp won a big recruiting battle with Jamias Williams. He could be a huge impact for their class starting next year in Columbia, so that'll be one to watch. He was one of the ones that, Georgia had their signing class locked up a long time ago, pretty much. He was one of the ones in the little bit of excitement that went on National Signing Day for Georgia. Yeah, he had 5 breakups and 3 interceptions his senior year. So moving on to number 5, according to ESPN's state rankings for the state of Georgia, Andrew Thomas from Pace Academy. He's the 6'5", 326-pound offensive tackle. He's signed with Georgia. He's a 4-star prospect. We're down to the 4 stars again with Jamias Williams. These players are going to be electric. Obviously offensive linemen are a huge deal to get, especially in the SEC where the offensive linemen and the defensive line, those are the 2 places where the games are won and lost. So yeah, he's number 5. Georgia signed 4 of the top 5 prospects in the state of Georgia, really dominating this border.
Yeah, with Thomas, a stellar player, offensive tackle, so doesn't have a stat line we could give you, but maybe if Georgia has more guys like him, like they're getting in this recruiting class, they won't have to start a Rhode Island transfer at tackle. But Thomas, he looks legit, and worst comes to worst, he's got good size, so the coaches definitely have something to work with. Another guy that could be part of a huge offensive line in terms of size and also talent, a guy that, if he keeps going, best case scenario for him would be right up in the NFL draft because he's got everything going for him. And I think with the good coaching and Coach Pittman in Georgia, Thomas has all the ability to be a great player. So another player I'm excited to watch. And now on to number 6 in the state, Davis Mills, a quarterback, going to Stanford. He's a 4-star, 85 grade from ESPN. Went to GAC, Greater Atlanta Christian, 6'4", around 200 pounds. Davis is a phenomenal player. I went to watch him play against St. Pius in week 4 of the regular high school football season, and he ended up having a perfect passer rating through halftime of that game. And Davis is an incredible player. Stanford, I don't even know if they know how good he is just because there's a lot of potential left that he hasn't been able to tap into yet. But I think with the great coaching at Stanford and being able to devote more time to his game, he could really turn into a great player. So he's definitely one to keep your eye on. That's a name to know, especially being a quarterback, with quarterbacks being probably the most popular player. So watch out for Davis. I'd be willing to bet that you'll hear that name a lot over the next 3 to 4 years.
And then moving on to number 7, we have Aubrey Solomon, defensive tackle. He's from Leesburg, Georgia, in the Lee County High School. He's another big body at 6'3", 300. He signed with Michigan. There was a chance for a time that he was going to sign with Georgia, but Georgia eventually came in second in that race. Michigan won out, so Jim Harbaugh has got a good one up there. Number 1 defensive tackle out of the state of Georgia. So he has the possibility of being a superstar, especially since, like I mentioned earlier, defensive line is one of the key components to winning in the Power 5 conferences in college football. So watch out for him. And then moving on to number 8, another Georgia signee, William Poole III from Hapeville Charter. He's 6 feet, 179. He's one that would have been locked up for a little while. Not too much excitement with him heading into signing day. And then we got 2 more 9 and 10 to round out the top 10.
All right, now number 9, Trey Sermon, a running back out of Marietta, Georgia, Sprayberry High School, 6'1", 214, 4-star prospect with an 84 grade, going to Oklahoma. Now on to number 10. It's the first time Alabama has popped up on this list, signing Xavier McKinney, the number 3 safety in the state, from Roswell, Georgia, and Roswell High School. McKinney is 6'1", 196, and is a 4-star rated prospect. So Georgia overall did a great job keeping other Power 5 schools out of the state, and especially out of the state's top 10 prospects. Georgia was able to nab 5 or 50% of the top 10. So that's incredible with Georgia keeping lots of players in state. Overall, as you keep scrolling down the list on ESPN.com, that G logo pops up, every few prospects. So Kirby Smart's done a great job. It's a big improvement over Mark Richt in state. So that's definitely a plus of having Smart as the coach.
So although Georgia's been doing so well in state, they took the top 10. One notable absence has been for Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech didn't show up in the top 10, and they don't do that very often, but Their number one player out of the state of Georgia right now is Jaquan Henderson. He's from Newton High School. He's a 4-star outside linebacker. He had a down senior season. He only had 52 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. He only played in 9 games, so he didn't play a complete season. And then as a junior, he had 70 tackles, 7 sacks, and 9 tackles for loss. I think what Tech has here is more of an opportunity with a lot of potential. If the coaching staff in Paul Johnson, if they can work with him a little bit, he has a lot of potential judging by some of his grades on ESPN. He does round out as an 80, so he's a 4-star prospect. So there's just something to work with. And also, Georgia Tech had the number 41 prospect in the state, and Jaitlin Askew. He's a cornerback from McEachern High School. McEachern is another big powerhouse. They have a lot of good players come out of there. He's another 4-star, also with an 80 grade according to ESPN. He's 5'9", so a little bit on the smaller side, but maybe he will grow a little bit more. And again, Tech has a lot of stuff to work with. Paul Johnson has a reputation for taking players that aren't as good and making them better as they stay at Tech. And now we are going to move on to some team rankings. So Georgia, according to 24/7 Sports Composite 2017 rankings, Georgia finished with the number 3 class. They had 2 5-stars, 18 4-stars, and 6 3-stars. So again, Kirby Smart doing a great job keeping the players in the state of Georgia.
All right, now with Georgia Tech, some high hopes for them, but ended up with only the number 46 recruiting class in the country, with 1 4-star and 21 3-stars. So like you said, Frankie, a lot of good talent in there for Coach Johnson to start with the 21 3-stars. And of course, he'll make the players better, and his coaching staff will. So the team's got some good stuff to work with, but not as many of the flashy 4 or 5-stars that Tech would hope to get.
And to be fair, Tech has that academic guideline they have to follow, which a lot of players don't look at Tech because they know they won't be able to get in, versus maybe a Georgia or an Alabama. So Tech does a great job getting the raw tools there. They don't have as many polished players. But once they get there, Georgia Tech can turn them into something a lot better than they were. They find diamonds in the rough, and then they polish them up, and then they become real diamonds like Justin Thomas and some others. So Tech will be fine here. And then Georgia State, they finished with the number 98 class. They had 8 3-star prospects. They did fire their coach, and they hired Sean Elliott, the former South Carolina offensive line coach. So they got a new facility coming in the fall. They have a new coach. So after making their first bowl appearance a couple of years ago in a down season this season, I think Georgia State's on the rise again, and maybe we'll have a better chance at winning some more games in the fall.
Yeah, now on to Georgia Southern, the number 102 recruiting class. Overall, they had 7 3-stars, so they brought in some good talent. Notably got a wide receiver from Benedictine, John Wesley Kennedy, who had a great season, lots of speed, good talent to work with. Outside of him, there's several other solid 3-stars they have. To be more specific, there's 6 others, but Southern's got some good starting talent again, just like Tech, and it's another class for them where if they can capitalize and make the good guys great, then they can really start knocking off more upsets that they have on their schedule and, continue to be a competitor in their conference.
And then Kennesaw State, we'll finish out with them. KSU has 1 3-star prospect at the number 160th class in the country. They've been doing really well, especially for a fledgling program. They almost made the FCS playoffs last season. They were almost, I think they had votes for being ranked in the FCS polls. They're one of those teams that could be kind of what a Georgia Southern was down in the FCS ranks not too long ago. One of those teams that'll start beating teams they are not supposed to. I think Kennesaw State is on the right track. They did get 1 3-star. That recruiting class ranking will get a little bit better, I think. But you have to remember, they're not in the Division I, so a lot of players that want to go play Division I will go play at a Georgia State or a Georgia Southern instead of a Kennesaw State. But I do think they're a program on the rise as well. So the state of Georgia had a good recruiting season. They had kept a lot of talent in state, and it looks like there's going to be another good season on the gridiron next fall. Thank you again for finding us, whether it be on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com, on Twitter, where you can always follow us at ATL Sportscasts. Remember to subscribe to us in iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher Radio. We thank you if you've already done that. And you can also find us on YouTube. If you don't get the podcast on any of the other directories, you can get them on YouTube as well. You can subscribe to us there as well. It would mean a lot. And we hope to see you next time with another show.